The Bundesliga gets back underway on Friday and Bayer Leverkusen will be playing that opening game as is customary. Xabi Alonso talking about what's ahead and only what's ahead because he says the past is the past. We can only speak about what lies ahead of us. We know that every game is difficult and we will expect that starting tomorrow. Well, Archie Rhind-Tutt spent most of last season on the sidelines somewhere in Germany talking to Xabi Alonso on what was a wonderful campaign. He's with us now. He'll be with us for the whole new
Only
season.
when he wasn't talking
in the
to
Bundesliga.
Edin Terzic.
When he wasn't talking to Edin Terzic or Thomas Tuchel, when Thomas Tuchel would speak to Archie on those few occasions. But Archie, let's just talk a little bit about Leverkusen. Is there a feeling of excitement? Is everybody feeling good vibes around this Leverkusen side going into the new season?
Around Leverkusen they are, and because they've not lost any of their big players from last season, there'd been a lot of talk about Jonathan Tah going to Bayern Munich. That's a move that didn't materialise in the end, and there's even talk about him maybe extending his contract as well. So that, for example, the biggest player of them all for them, who is one of their smallest players, but he's the biggest in quality, Florian Wirtz, has stayed around, is going to be one of the things to watch for me this season, particularly the long-distance battle that he has with his international teammate and similar wizard in that number 10 role, Jamal Musiala, because Musiala outshone Wirtz in the Euros, I think it's fair to say. Wirtz had a good Euros, but Musiala had a great one. And I think that Wirtz maybe has a point to prove. Difficult to say that maybe when you've gone 51 games unbeaten, and you've been the star player of a team. But in that Europa League final, I think he was muscled off a little bit too easily. And if he is going to prove himself to be in that world-class bracket, then he needs to come up with the goods in a big way this season. It's likely to be his last at Leverkusen, I would say. There's been lots of talk about him moving on and finding the right time for that. But this summer has not been that. But yeah, he is definitely the star of this Xabi Alonso team. And Xabi Alonso, you're seeing by the quotes there, he's moved very much back into the mode that he wants to be in, which is putting the pressure on everyone else and just happy to let his team do the talking on the pitch. And I would say as well that it's a rare thing that the champions don't really have the same pressure as the team who actually finished third behind them. Because Bayern Munich are the team who have all the pressure, and Leverkusen still, well, it's not really on them as much as you'd think it would be.
It's very much going to be on Vincent Kompany, isn't it, Archie?
Oh, yeah. And particularly when you walk into that job as Vincent Kompany and you are 6th, 7th choice. Still not sure exactly which one of those, such was the chronology of events. But Vincent Kompany has a huge job on his hands, in some ways because he was in that pecking order for getting the job. The pressure's off him a little bit because expectations aren't quite where they would be if he was a coach of greater repute. He was a player of fantastic repute, and that will be carried over to the expectations somewhat. But he has a huge job on his hand given what a mess Bayern Munich were last season, particularly at the back. 45 goals conceded in the Bundesliga is not something that Vincent Kompany, the player, would have settled for, let alone the coach. And I wonder actually as well whether it's that centre-back pairing, which right now looks like Min-Jae Kim and Dayot Upamecano. They've certainly got the quality as in terms of technical skills, but I think that mentally there is a question mark for me over the leadership of them both in that back line. And I think that one of the greatest leaders of their centre-backs that they had has moved to Man United in Matthijs de Ligt. Eric Dyer was praised for those qualities in the second half of last season, but I don't think that he's got the technical defensive skills or indeed the physical abilities that Min-Jae Kim and Dayot Upamecano have. So I think that Vincent Kompany does have a lot of work to do, and those are just a few of the roadworks, as they would describe it in Germany, that he has to solve this season. So, yeah, a huge campaign for Vincent Kompany and Bayern.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out, isn't it, Craig, with Vincent Kompany coming in, a powerhouse like Bayern. Because obviously when Xabi Alonso came in, he hadn't won a title back then either. Obviously he wasn't taking over Bayern, though.
Yeah. Well, the good news is he'll get all the support of the hierarchy, won't he, if it starts to go wrong? They're not one for throwing people under the bus, are the Bayern Munich power brokers. But look, as Archie has already pointed out, they travelled the globe begging people to take this job. Couldn't get the people that they wanted, or the people didn't want to take it at that particular time, and they end up with a manager who had just been relegated from the Premier League, who by the way, been relegated from the Premier League and had refused to sort of bend the knee in terms of his tactics. What got him up from the Championship with 101 points, you saw from the graphic, and then he just thought they could continue in that vein and all would be well, and he never recognised that at any point during the season to try and make the changes, and not that they may have stayed up, but they may have had a better chance. And now he goes into the Bayern job where there's a lot of egos, there's a lot of problems, and Archie touched on them, particularly defensively. We saw them getting ripped apart by some average teams in the Bundesliga last year, and they made change, and Thomas Tuchel, they made change after change after change to that back line. It seemed like an almost weekly change of a back four, two centre-halves, even the full-backs. And so, yeah, I mean, have they got enough going forward to negate the deficiency? They have signed Paulinho, the player that they wanted for 18 months or so. That they have got that player in to give him a bit more solidity. But if Leverkusen put the hammer down again, then he's going to have to do the same, and that's a big question.
I think I'm with Archie. I think the biggest job it has is to change the mentality, which seems amazing to talk about Bayern Munich and to change the mentality to a winning mentality. Because last year they were miles off Leverkusen. And even though they won the league the previous year, it was almost by default. And I think that's what Leverkusen have over Bayern, that mentality. This is a team that never knows when it's beaten, always seems to come back. Whereas when we think of Bayern now, it's like you're waiting for them to slip up. You're waiting for them to make mistakes. And if we're thinking that, the players are thinking that because we're watching it happen right in front of our eyes. So, honestly, I don't think it will be so much about the tactics. It'll be more about, can he change their mentality back to what Bayern used to be, of we are the dominant team here and we're going to show everybody how good we are. That seems to have disappeared.
Those two centre-halves that Archie mentioned, they were in absolute tatters last year, confidence-wise. I mean, Kim came in from Italy, a great reputation, but he struggled. And it seems to me that Upamecano, this has been an ongoing process now for a couple of years. It's not just a bad year last year. There was a lot of mistakes the year before. Think about the Champions League games and others where he just seemed to be getting caught in the rabbit in the headlights and making bad decisions. And the two of them, if you remember back towards the latter end of last year, the two of them were just completely dropped. It was De Ligt and it was Dyer, going into the big games. That's how bad it was for these two. And yeah, as Archie's saying, it looks like they will be the hub of the back four. Now, unless they can put, from Kim's point of view, the last 12 months and from Upamecano's probably the last 18 to 24 months behind them and get back to being the players that I think we know they can be, then I don't see how that's going to change for Bayern Munich, because they were pretty bad last year in that position.
Now, Archie, we couldn't have you on without asking you for your season predictions in the Bundesliga. So here they are. Talk us through them.
What is that photo you've got of me?
We had quite the fun yesterday. Don't worry, Shaka's was topless. You're lucky that this is all it is.
I'm glad mine's not. So, I think that RB Leipzig are the next most likely team to be in the mix for the title, and I think that they'll be a little bit closer than they were last season. I don't think Leverkusen are going unbeaten again, and I think that Borussia Dortmund, there'll be a gap between Leipzig and Dortmund. I think Stuttgart will be knocking about the European places again behind them, but I still can't see past anyone outscoring Harry Kane. Such was the way that, he was miles ahead last season, and I expect him to still get a hatful of chances this year. I just think that, just to build on what Craig and Stevie were saying there, It is about how do Bayern start playing again so that they are setting the terms of every game, because that's what we know Bayern Munich to be like. And even when they were playing against the likes of Stuttgart, who ended up finishing above them last season, they were the ones to bend the knee to Stuttgart, for example, in their home game against them, which is very un-Bayern-like. And when you look at the fact that Bayern Munich have a budget which is some 150 million euros for their players' wages, some 150 million euros bigger than the next biggest in the league, so it's double everyone else, you cannot be not setting the terms of a game. You have to be dominating. You have to be playing other teams off the park. And it's about how they get back to that. Michael Olise is going to be a really interesting figure, I think, to watch this season, because I think that he's got a lot of skills to burn. And I'm really interested to see how he fits into this lineup. But yeah, the biggest question marks are, I think, defensively. If João Palhinha does his job, maybe they don't get that far.